enabled and perpetrated his abuse. USA Gymnastics and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee knew that I was abused by their official team doctor long before I was ever made aware of their knowledge.
I are public servants whose job is to protect getting away with this. This is not justice. Enough is enough. Today, I ask you all to hear my voice. I ask you, please do all that is in your power to ensure that these individuals are held responsible and accountable for ignoring my initial report.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin welcomes his Australian
from prisoner-on-prisoner violence. We are also investigating sexual abuse of gay, lesbian, and transgender prisoners by prisoners and staff.
Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark, who heads the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, said the investigation will focus on civil rights violations amongst other issues of concern.
The Justice Department is committed to seeking to address the devastating effects of prison staff shortages, inadequate policies and training, and the lack of accountability.
At least 26 inmates have died in confirmed or suspected homicides in state prisons last year. The Department of Justice, we understand, has been looking into allegations of civil rights violations within state prisons for years.
This investigation will be independent, thorough, and fair. We have not made and will not make any conclusions until our investigation is complete.
The Georgia Department of Corrections sent Fox 5 a statement, in part reading, quote, the GDC is committed to the safety of all of the offenders in its custody and denies that it has engaged in a pattern or practice of violating their civil rights or failing to protect them from harm due to violence, end quote.
Clark said way, things melting down outside the Los Angeles' new Center for Civil and Human Rights. Not exactly civil. Protesters making a bunch of commotion and stole the spotlight from Mayor Eric Garcetti and his team. The Los Angeles Times reporting that they're upset about homelessness in the city and wanted to get the mayor's attention. And all bets are that they certainly got it. Numbers are in part why APD says it's ready to try a new approach to fighting crime. It's come up with a new plan to move officers with decades of experience out of desk jobs and back into the streets. The idea behind the plan is that veteran officers have a lot more experience with and connections in certain communities. And putting men and women like them on the streets they used to patrol is one way to foster trust and fight crime.
Notice we had people that were trying out that were 50 years old, 60-year-olds, and I could not hold them any different to the standard of the 20-year-old. The job description is the same.
The move will also help boost the number of officers on the streets as APD works to beef up police and staffing.
The department is also acknowledging the role of repeat offenders in rising crime rates. APD tells Fox 5 an analysis of the arrests made this summer shows more than 36 people being arrested over and over again. 2 of those people are accused of murder.
I don't know if it's a matter of we think that it's falling on deaf ears or if they're not being held to the same level of accountability.
The chief also noted the importance of community engagement with judges on repeat offender cases.
Still to come as we continue tonight on Fox 5.
This is the latest blow to an ongoing crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong. The group were among 12 defendants who pleaded guilty earlier this month to participating in the vigil. 3 others were given suspended sentences. They were all charged with taking part in an unauthorized assembly, with 7 of them facing an additional charge for inciting others to take part. 8 other activists were charged over last year's vigil. The founder of the former newspaper, Apple Daily, and Alliance leader have pleaded not guilty and will stand trial in November. Prominent pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong and 3 others had previously pleaded guilty over their roles in the event and were sentenced to between 4 to 10 months in jail. Police last year banned the annual candlelight vigil for the first time in 3 decades, citing public health risks from the coronavirus. Although critics believe the ban is part of an ongoing crackdown on dissent in the semi-autonomous Chinese territory following months of anti-government protests in 2019.
competitor. The White House continues to put forth the idea that they are willing to go to the mat for Biden's tax ideas. I'm Frank McCaffrey reporting.
According to the Census Bureau, government relief passed in response to the pandemic moved millions of Americans out of poverty last year. Regardless, the official poverty rate increased by 1 percentage point, with 11.4% of Americans falling below the poverty line. That's more than 37 million people. It was the first increase in poverty after 5 consecutive years of declines. But the Census Bureau's metric is different. It takes into account government programs and stimulus payments, which showed that the number actually dropped by more than 2.5% after the aid was factored in. Their numbers show stimulus money moving almost 12 million people out of poverty, and expanded unemployment benefits doing the same for another 5.5 million Americans.
Room, make elder care, child care more affordable, or whether we should protect corporations and the wealthiest Americans, that's a debate we're happy to have.
Joel Griffith of Heritage Foundation tells us the plan will backfire.
If you're not making more than $400,000 per year, if you're working, chances are you're actually employed by a business or an employer that earns above that threshold. And what that means for you is going to be fewer job opportunities. And we know from study after study that when you raise taxes on investors and on businesses, those costs are passed on down the chain.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is recently quoted as saying the greatest threat to our economic recovery and our long-term economic prospects is not a marginally higher tax rate for large corporations or the top 1% of taxpayers. But Griffith feels it reverses policies that were working.
Following the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which lowered taxes for individuals and businesses in 2017, we saw 12,000 factories expand or come to the United States, and that started to reverse years of losses in the manufacturing sector.
I'm Frank McCaffrey reporting.
Serbia kicked off.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 292 points, or 0.8% to 34,577. The Nasdaq fell 68 points, that's 0.5%, to 15,037. And the S&P 500 fell 26 points, or 0.6%, to 4,443. And before we go,
is ready to launch from the Kennedy Space Center tonight. For the first time in 60 years of human spaceflight, a rocket is poised to blast into orbit with no professional astronauts on board. SpaceX's first private flight will be led by a 38-year-old entrepreneur who is bankrolling the entire trip. He's taking 2 sweepstakes winners with him on the 3-day round-the-world trip, along with a healthcare worker who survived childhood cancer. They'll ride alone in a fully automated Dragon capsule, the same kind that SpaceX uses to send astronauts to and from the International Space Station for NASA. But the
potential external threats, boost its self-defense posture, and promote peace on the Korean Peninsula. The test followed 2 short-range North Korean ballistic missile launches detected by South Korea's military earlier today, followed by leptospirosis, scrubthufus, and malaria. Now, these infections typically spike after the rainy season in India. Dengue can lead to internal bleeding, liver enlargement, circulatory shutdown, and death. Prevention efforts targeting at destroying mosquito breeding sites, like removing trash or old tires and other objects containing standing water, are still the best ways to scrub the disease.
COVID has awoken us to the dangers of contaminated air, an awakening scientists have long been calling for. The original rules for our COVID response was to wash hands, disinfect everything, and keep 6 feet apart. But this failed to recognize the dangers that surround us in the air, beyond the naked eye. To safeguard against the spread of dangerous pathogens, experts have called for a paradigm shift in how we view indoor air quality. Proper ventilation is vital to ensure disease does not rapidly spread indoors.
So in the longer term, we really need to consider much better building designs, for which we have now, to make sure that the designs support clean indoor air in general, and a part of this infection transmission, and do it in a way which consumes as little energy as possible.
Insiders hope the devastating pandemic will be the catalyst for this paradigm shift.
The evidence is there that our minimum standards are lower than they should be, and there ought to be at least some increase in ventilation rates, and I think there should be some increase in filtration efficiency, because we know that has serious
who allegedly cut their ankle tracking bracelets off and are now on the run. This while awaiting sentence for their role in an $18 million COVID relief fraud case, facing the possibility of years behind bars. Now, according to the FBI, both suspects removed their location monitoring devices and vanished from their pretrial supervision late last month. A Los Angeles federal judge has since signed bench warrants for the couple's arrest and believe the two are still traveling together. Now, the two were found guilty in June of scheming to submit fraudulent loan applications under which they and others obtained more than $18 million in Paycheck Protection and Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program funds they used to put down payments on, get this, luxury homes in Southern California, as well as purchasing jewelry and other high-end items. Prosecutors filed papers on Monday requesting sentencing enhancements for the alleged escapees. Wherever they live in the region or the world, to mark the Day of Serb Unity, Freedom, and the national flag. The creation of the Serb world, or political unification of an estimated 1.3 million